a team and trust. Build a team and trust. So the things that you need to look for and bring in are, I mentioned it just a couple of minutes ago. Integrity is everything. Person's integrity. Ethics, you got to do the ethical thing.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller, and welcome to another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, patent and trademark attorney at Found & Miller IP Law, as well as a serial entrepreneur that loves to talk with others and hear their inventive journey. Today we have a great guest on. He is his name is John Standish, and he started his career in law enforcement. Had a fun career going from law enforcement to the fraud unit, and going to working with insurance companies, and now he's done his own startup. So welcome on the podcast, John.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
All right. Well, pleasure. Well, why don't you, I did a quick introduction, but why don't you start us at the beginning of your journey a little bit? 32 years, I think you said when we talked before, in law enforcement, or quite a while, and then you now kind of almost in your second career. So maybe walk us through or tell us a little bit about your journey. Sure.
Well, I am in my second career, technology, with a startup software company called Infinitics. We're based in Silicon Valley. Basically, we're an artificial software company that uses machine learning to extract structured and unstructured data and insurance claim files and deliver insights for better decisions. That's what we do. So, but my first career, how my journey started, goes way back in 1978, 79, when I got into law enforcement in the Bay Area. And I joined the California Highway Patrol in January of 1980, went through the academy, graduated, and went back to the San Francisco Bay Area.
So I know it's early on, but I'm gonna jump in, just ask you. So what, I always find it interesting, everybody, when they take different career paths. So what you originally directed you to law enforcement was, you wanted to serve people, you had other family that was in law enforcement.
Well, it's like, that was kind of an interesting thing. I was being pushed in two different directions early on in my life in high school. One direction was to become a professional golfer, because I had the talent. I played in high school and I enjoyed it, but I got burned out on it. I mean, you hit 1,000 golf balls a week, and eventually you're going to burn out. So God bless the men and women that do that now. It's incredible. But the other thing, was, should I become a doctor? Being kind of pushed that way. And then one night I took my local police department had a ride-along program where, if you lived in the city, you could sign up and ride with an officer for a couple of hours to see what it's like. It is a great community building tool that the police department uses, and that changed my life. This right then and there, I said, no, this is what I want to do. I like the aspect of public service, law enforcement, and that's the direction I went. So there was my first pivot in life. So I did that. So when I got on the highway patrol, just like everybody else, you are assigned to a regional office and you were on patrol duties. And just like any police department, patrol is the bread and butter, but then there's specialization programs. One of which was investigations, which I was always. I'm
going to jump in one more question, just because completely unrelated, but I'm not the only one that's had it. So highway patrol, you always wonder if you go 5 or 10 over, if you're likely to get pulled over. That's how everybody that always drives. So what was your pulling people over if they're going 5 over?
Well, I'll tell you, there's
I completely aside, but I always just had that question, so I figured I might as well take advantage of it.
Well, Devin, thank you for this. So here's the thing. If you're a highway patrol officer and you encounter a pack of cars and everyone's doing 75, 80 miles an hour, and they're just all traveling together, you could pick out one car, or maybe a better thing to do is get in front of everyone and slow everyone down and then move on. But if you are weaving in and out of traffic, accelerating, slowing down, following too closely, making unsafe lane changes, you are a target.
Okay.
I'll
So
just leave
kind
it
of the nail that sticks out gets hammered, so to speak.
pretty much. I mean, yeah, it's a fact of life.
All right. I was just curious. So I didn't mean to derail you, but it was, yeah, you mentioned highway patrol. I've always had that question. I know others have always had it, so I figured I'd get your perspective. So didn't mean to go too far side, but go ahead and continue on your journey.
So, so about the fifth year into the highway patrol, I had transferred out of the San Francisco Bay Area and gone to Sacramento, and I became fascinated with what's called accident reconstructing an event, an automobile collision. You know, science and math is involved, and so I had a background in that, and I liked numbers and the physics, and there was always this natural curiosity into me, like, why did this happen? Okay, and if that happened, what caused that to happen? You know, I mean, that was just it's my natural curiosity. So I really got interested in that and got accepted into a program on the highway patrol. It's called MAIT, the MAIT. It stands for Multidisciplinary Accident Investigation Team. And that is comprised of 4 individuals. There are 2 officers that have specialty training in what's known as occupant kinematics and vehicle dynamics. In other words, studying what happens to the human in an automobile collision when they're inside a compartment of an automobile. What caused them to be injured? What caused the fatality injured? Things, you know, really starting to drill down and reconstructing the event. And that was one of my first takeaways that I've carried on in life right now, is doing investigations or a project on a multidisciplinary approach. And what I mean by that, on the highway patrol, the MAIT team, you had your 2 officers, and you had Caltrans, California Department of Transportation engineer, who handled, you know, the roadway design, and then you had a motor carrier specialist, you know, a mechanic with some expertise. And so those 4 people would function as one team to reconstruct the event, looking at all different types of issues. And I really enjoyed that. So I did that, and then they asked me to, if I wanted to go into what was known as the Staged Automobile Collision Unit, which was attached to the Auto Theft Unit, and look at referrals from the insurance industry where if the insurance company suspected that the claim involved a staged automobile collision, because there's an inverse. If you can prove how an automobile collision occurred factually with evidence, the inverse is you can prove that the collision could not occur as being reported. So that was my first introduction into the world of insurance. And when I started, they told me what I was going to be doing. I didn't have a clue, anything about the insurance industry. You talk about fast on-the-job training and having to pick stuff up. And thank God there was some experienced officers and some wonderful people from the investigation teams in the insurance industry. They were great to work from and learn from about the nuances of insurance claims. And I really, really took a liking to this. I really enjoyed the work. So I did that for 9 years there out of Sacramento. And then I was recruited by the California Department of Insurance, the enforcement branch now, and there's a unit in there, it's called the Fraud Division. It's a law enforcement agency within a state regulatory agency. It's highly specialized, and their sole mission is to investigate reported instances of fraudulent insurance claims as it's reported by the insurance industry and consumers. Went in as a detective, and I retired as the chief of the fraud division on August 1st of 2010. And, you know, so it was really interesting. Is like, when I went in as a detective, the only thing I was focused on, you know, was obviously, you know, the criminal investigations. But as you start to ascend into the chairs of supervision and management and then executive ranks, there's a whole different world that you have to negotiate and manage. And I really enjoyed doing that. So again, some experience in creating legislation, the regulations that are put upon the insurance industry that monitor them and guide them while they're transacting insurance. And, you know, and over the years, I got really interested in technology. Now, you know, I was always the type of guy that, you know, I had to, if a new toy came out, had to have it. Had to have that new toy and try it out and use it. Had some good toys and some horrible toys.
You know what the prettiest the joke always goes, you know what the prettiest color for a car is, right?
Exactly.
New.
Exactly.
So
So
same thing with technology. I'm exactly the same way. So that's
yeah.
always fun.
So, I got to monitor and lead a number of different types of technology projects. And when I retired, for the first 90 days, I didn't do anything. I played golf. I read about 5 newspapers. I watched the morning news shows. I went to the beach. And it kind of got boring in a way. So, it's like, okay, I've got to do something. So I started a consulting company where I would provide services to the insurance industry, provide expert testimony and analysis if the insurance company got sued for bad faith or they got sued because their special investigation their special investigation unit did an investigation on what they thought was a fraudulent claim. Did they do it right? Did they abide by the regulations? Did they abide by the law? Did they document it correctly, report it correctly, that whole type of thing. And so I started doing a couple of these projects a year, not enough to really keep you busy full time, but I mean, it was nice to it's good to keep the mind engaged. But
I'll jump in just again, kind of an aside, but it's too fun of questions not to ask. So within the fraud unit, consulting, everything else, without getting into details that you couldn't disclose, what's the craziest case or what's the craziest circumstance you worked on?
Oh my God, Devin, we're going to need 4 other podcasts.
The 30-second overview, just the funny or one that you would never have thought of, or the craziest one you worked on.
Well, I wouldn't say, I don't know about crazy, but I think one of the ones that was most interesting that was really eye-opening I arrested this gentleman who lived in Carmel, California. And he was a professor at the Defense Language Institute, DLI, where they sent, where all the military troops go to learn a language before they're assigned overseas. So he was an Arabic language instructor. And he had a condominium on the Pebble Beach property, along with a home in Carmel Valley. Well, excuse me, not on the salary of a language professor at the DLI. So first warning. So what this guy was doing was staging automobile collisions quite frequently to fund his lifestyle.
Really?
And and so it was interesting working that investigation because he was tied to other things that we found about when I executed some search warrants for the premises. And it woke a lot of people up. I think that's one of my most memorable things, because it's the old adage: you never know what's on the other side of the door until you walk through it. And that one was really kind of interesting. But I've got a lot of others too. But
all right, we'll just hit on one. I thought it'd be interesting just to hear some. I'm sure there are plenty of fascinating stories. But
you meet some incredibly mentally challenged individuals that try and get away with stuff, and then you meet some very sophisticated and very smart people that get away with it for a while until they're caught. Those are I always like working the complex organized crime stuff. But anyway,
jumping back to your story,
I was always interested in technology, new software programs, new computer systems. Always had to have the fastest and nicest computer. I mean, typical stuff. So when I retired, I had met some people from SAS, the SAS Institute. And some amazing, brilliant people. Really enjoyed interacting with them. And I was asked if I would be interested in becoming an alliance partner and a consultant and work with SAS, which I did. And I worked in the state and local government practice for criminal justice, along with a financial crimes practice, which is interacted with the insurance people as well. Did that for 3 years, had a great time, learned a lot. And then I get this email out of nowhere through LinkedIn from Sri Ramaswamy, who was going to start a company called Infinalytics. And she asked if I would be interested in joining the startup. I was very flattered. I never saw this coming. So we talked, and a couple months later, I bid my goodbyes and to the SAS team, and I started with Sri and Infinalytics. And over the last 4 years, we have created an amazing product, artificial intelligence product that's called Charlie, It does three different things. We are a bootstrapped startup. We have not taken any funding from anybody yet. Door is still open, but trying to find the right VC who has a broad vision and can see down the road instead of the quarterly spreadsheet reports. Can be a challenge. I mean, it's just the nature of the game. We understand that. But we're having a lot of fun. Done some amazing projects for people and some customers, and that's my journey. So if you would have asked me in December of 1978 how I would like being part of an artificial intelligence software company, I would have looked at you and said, "You're nuts. I don't know what you're talking about." But here we are.
You never know where things are going to take you. So with that, it's a good, interesting point. So you to take, I mean, and I can see some overlaps in how it did, but, working from police officer, highway patrol, and then fraud unit and some of the things you went there, that one, that kind of certainly makes a common thread in how you do it. Now you're over to AI and, artificial intelligence and computer software. And how is that transition or, from almost two, at least seemingly disparate or different types of careers? How was that transition, or how did that work for you?
It was interesting. It was an interesting process, and it's still an ongoing process because what we have done at Infinalytics is following what I had learned in my first career. Shri and Rama and Bala, the other co-founders, it didn't take too long to realize that a great approach is to take a multidisciplinary approach. So we created some artificial intelligence software for the insurance industry. So, if you just have, a data scientist and an architect set out on this journey to do that with no knowledge of the insurance industry, it's not going to work. So having a domain expert or, as part of the core team really helps. And so like when we started this journey, I mean, Shri will tell you that I was locked in a room in Santa Clara, which would total about 2 weeks. And the engineers and the data scientists did a brain dump, starting at insurance 101 to investigations 101 to try and spot fraud and other patterns of behavior patterns and other types of analysis that an insurance company would do to keep, to keep profitable and running. So it's kind of like, the analogy is like, you're going to build a piece of AI software for an industry. One of the first things that you should do is pick an expert from that industry and mimic his or her mind. That is a huge advantage, because it's like, it's just like the analogy between law enforcement and investigating claims. If you take a senior patrol officer who has worked a beat or a city for 20 years, they will tell you to the day and the hour of the day where the troublemakers are going to be, and then go find them. Right? It's just experience. They know their city, they know their environment. The same thing with the claims examiner. A senior accomplished claims examiner knows shortcuts, how to get to the bottom of things quickly, how to document it quickly and settle the claim quickly, whereas the new person that's been hired to adjust claims is in a huge learning curve, especially if they have no experience in that. So one of the things that we strive to do with our solution, our Charlie platform, is to help the new claims examiner learn from the senior accomplished, because we mimic the mind with our AI of those people, and so they can learn faster, as it goes along.
No, that's a good one. And oftentimes you think, and I'm always work a lot with the software and the engineers type side, and oftentimes I think there's sometimes almost a flaw in the logic of, hey, I can figure this out, or we can come up to speed, or this is really a software problem. But if you're not getting the full background and experience of someone that's done that, it's going to be hard to try and replicate it if you don't know what type of thing. So I think that's a very good point.
I remember 3 years ago, we were invited to participate and speak in this insurance accelerator program. It's a Silicon Valley insurance accelerator. It's tied to Stanford University. And the very first meeting we went to, the very first 2-day conference, I mean, there must have been over a couple of hundred people from startups. The room was packed, and they had industry leaders, making presentations. technology leaders, people from, the big companies, and everyone's feverishly taking notes and handing on every word they said. And I remember sitting next to Sri, and as I was looking around in the room, and it's like, okay, besides the insurance people speaking on stage, that work for the insurance company right now, I think I was the only one in the audience with any experience working within the industry. And I said, I don't know if this is going to work, because you had people creating software with no knowledge on how the business or the insurance industry functions. And what's really kind of interesting now, when we go back and participate in these programs, most of the people aren't there. Companies didn't make it. So I guess that's one of the takeaways for a startup, is like find someone from your domain that you're going to service, and you got to bring them in to be successful, I think.
No, I that's similar. I'm working with another startup that is going to be launching their product in not too long, and they're in the diabetes. It's technology and it's for wearables, but they're in the diabetes monitoring for wearables. And one of the things I think they did to their credit, and very good idea, is they brought in a doctor that's a diabeologist that works with the patients on a day by day. And it may, the insights you get from that side, we can do the best technology, but the insights you get from the doctor and how the patients, what they need to know and how they work, and much like what you're saying, it's a big difference between what you can do.
Exactly. That is a great example. Having the doctor there as part of the team going, you can do this, or no, you can't do that.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the other thing too with, I wanted to mention, the regulation guidelines and practices set onto the insurance industry. In the beginning of this, we saw a lot of companies come up with some of these ideas and the software that they were building. And it's just like, I wanted to hand them a copy of the regulations for the Claims Practice Act and the suspected frauds. And you all need to read this before you think about creating your software, because what you designed, it's never going to work. It's just not going to get introduced.
That's interesting. Okay, well, I'm going to shift gear. I always have my last two questions, but the question before my last two questions, one more is, so how is it? So, as far as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, police and that is always, governmental, run through the government. You have, what would be, no one's ever secure, but it's certainly a different animal when you're a government employee as opposed to a startup. How is that transition? Is there anything different or anything of note or anything unexpected when for a while of your career, you're working as an police officer and for the government industry versus now doing it as a startup?
That's a great question. And there are some similarities. And what I mean by that is like, okay, there's this misnomer, I think, that, if you work for government, you got a job for life. Well, that's not true. If you are a screw up and you don't do your job, you will get fired. It's plain and simple. So, it's kind of like this rumor that's running around. So people are held accountable. Now, in law enforcement, if you screw up and make mistakes, you're probably not going to be around too long, but your life and other people's lives are going to be in jeopardy. So you can't do that.
Yeah.
You got to stay sharp. And that's how they go through the process to find the right people and weed them out through the training. And the people that are on the streets are competent and can do this. But in a startup, it's kind of like there's this flavor of, and we have fallen into this trap. We have been suckered in, where these people will come along and they'll say, because of my skills, you need to hire me. And I think they're nothing but quick buck artists, and they don't stick around too long after you pay them an ungodly sum of money, and they didn't do anything. So it's like, being committed when you start working on a startup and into a project, you need some people that are committed and have integrity and ethics, and they can be resilient. Because I will tell you, going into a startup mode, especially in technology, is not easy. If it was easy, a lot of people would do it, right? And the money would flow. A lot of people, and there isn't. It's hard.
Yep.
But if you stick with it and you have the right team and the right idea and then the right mentorship and then hopefully the funding will come, you can scale. And so, yeah, there's some similarities, but you know, if you're doing the right thing and moving forward, and you have those core principles, I think you're okay.
All right. Well, that's great. That's great insight. Okay. Well, we're reaching towards the end of the podcast, and now I will hit on the last two questions I always hit on at the end of the podcast. And the first one is, so what was the worst business decision you ever made?
Yeah, but thank you for that negative question. Okay.
All right, I'll give you the more.
Typical. This is like the typical lawyer. You don't ask the question unless you know the answer. So, here's our biggest, our worst decision we made was having a big vision, which we did, but we didn't start small. And what I mean by that, so in the business of insurance, they're called lines, different lines of insurance: automobile, workers' comp, disability and health, long-term care, property and casualty, personal lines, liability, and then you have all your specialization programs as well. So when we designed Charlie, we designed it for all lines of business. So that's how we built it and coded it. I mean, we processed over 33 million claims to date, and we have over 2,000 unique insights developed from the artificial intelligence. Our mistake was not focusing on one line of business. In other words, starting small, be successful, and then scale it. So looking back, I mean, yeah, you need the broad vision. Absolutely. You need to have a broad vision, but picking, one line and starting small and then scaling from there. That's what we did.
And that's probably a little bit the same. But the technologist in me or the engineer in me always, we could do these 5 cool things and we could do all these, and it'd be awesome. It'll be the best product ever. And yet then you lose focus on doing one thing really well first and then expanding from there.
And then the other thing that we learned is that, when we started approaching potential customers, no one has the same problem. I mean, each one of these lines of businesses have their own intricacies, their own little quirks. And, so if you try, when you talk to a venture capital team, I mean, and they're used to an app that someone buys for one function, sometimes they have a hard time understanding the complexity of the business of insurance. And now you talk about all different lines and all the things that are, that go in. It's like, okay, now this is too long of a sales cycle. No, I don't know anything about this. I'm not comfortable. And so, we've learned.
All right. Well, that's a good mistake to learn from. So, and I'll give you they always ask that question because, too often you hear the highlight reels of a bit, I read, and I always love to read books and, or at least on different companies and the history. And I listen to some podcasts and shows, but that's always kind of, if I have free time when I listen to. For odds and aside, if you're ever looking for a good podcast, I love to listen to is the podcast called Business Wars, where they kind of go through like an Apple versus a IBM or Windows, and you get Ford versus Ferrari, and you get all these different kind of businesses that go up and head to head. But you always get the highlight reels to a large degree of, hey, everything worked out great and everything built up, and you never get to hear, hey, this is not an easy thing. It's not just, hey, I started a company, it grew and it was a wild success and there was no hiccups along the way, which no matter the business is never the case. And so that's why I always ask what the worst business decision you made. And I think that was a great.
I would be highly skeptical if someone uttered that in public. Highly skeptical.
So, okay, well, now we'll go to the second question that I always ask is, so if you were to speaking to someone that was getting into startups or just started or wanting to get into startups, but kind of in that phase of life, what would be the top piece or the one piece of advice you would give them?
Build a team and trust. Build a team and trust. So the things that you need to look for and bring in are, I mentioned it just a couple of minutes ago. Integrity is everything. Person's integrity. Ethics, you got to do the ethical thing. If you take shortcuts or you cross over that line that's going to be perceived as something illegal down the road, it's going to come back and bite you. Don't do it. So ethics is it. And then you need to have people that are resilient. There will be tough times. I mean, cash flow is always an issue.
Yeah.
It seems until you're, into like, it seems like, advanced Series A or Series B funding, and then maybe it's not an issue. But I mean, cash flow, I mean, you will always worry about cash flow, and there will be tough times. So you need the people that are going to stick this out with you, because there will be payoffs. No quitters. You don't want any quitters. And then you have to be able to pivot. So like when we started, we had this vision. There was going to be two different divisions within Finalytics, one on healthcare, one on general claims. It didn't even last a few months. You need to pivot. You need to pivot on where the market needs, or is the marketplace is telling you what the draw is and what they need. So you have to be able to pivot, or else you won't survive.
No, that's very good insight, and I think all good advice. So perfect. Well, thank you for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. I always get to the end of these, and there's about 20 more things I think would be fun and interesting to touch on that we never have the time. But it was fun to hear your journey and your story, and it's certainly one that is an interesting one, and I think a great one to learn from and to hear. So if people are interested in whether it's getting to know a little bit more about your product and what you guys do, or looking to invest or become part of the team, or just reach out to you guys and find out more, what's the best way to reach out to you guys?
Infinalytics.com. Just click the button info and send us that email. We also have an 800 number there on our website. It's INFINILYTICS, Infinalytics.com. And it goes straight to my smartphone every time someone sends something in. So you're not going to get lost, and we will respond.
Perfect. Well, certainly for those that are interested or want to reach out, certainly direct them your way. And thank you again for coming on. For those of you that are also if you're needing any help with patents or trademarks, or looking to or any advice for your startup or small business, I'm also happy to help. So feel free to reach out to us at Miller IP Law, and anybody on the podcast. They're always happy to talk or connect up with you as well. If anybody is looking for help, we're here to help you. So thank you again, John, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully to hear or see how your journey continues on, and wish you a very successful journey.
Thank you, Devin. I've really enjoyed it. So please stay in touch.
Will do.
All right. Thank you.